So what is the role of literature and data analysis here in these two types of studies? So one thing that uh, differentiate case study from a field survey with a questionnaire is data triangulation. In case study, we usually have a sample size, low sample size, lower than 10, but it should have a data triangulation. What does that mean? That means that if here, for example, in a case like case A, for case 1, for construct A, you have found that the score for a construct is 1 out of 7, for example, or 3 out of 7. You shouldn't just be satisfied with the answer to that interview question to give a score. You also need to gather more data, to ask more questions, to check for secondary data, to ensure that if that person said that alignment score is 5 out of 7, that is supported by other ways. So we're going to go to the detail of this. So that's the main difference between case study and field survey in the table of constructs. Here, you usually in the field survey, you have 2 or 3 questions with a score of 1 to 7. But in a case study, when you try to measure a construct, not only you ask those questions of, that the answers are 1 to 7, but you also try to ask some open-ended questions. You gather secondary data to make sure that that value is correct. So this is that was the difference between a case study and field survey. How is that different between exploratory and explanatory case study? In an explanatory case study, you create the constructs, you define the construct, you find the measurement for the construct using the literature. So because you already have a theory. And then you just try to support the values given for each construct in a case using interviewees' quotes and the numbers that they provide as for the survey questionnaires. So the data is just provide some support for the values of those constructs in an explanatory case study. In an exploratory case study, you have some idea about the constructs and construct names, but there are several constructs that are created because of the literature. Sorry, because of the data analysis. So the data analysis will create a construct name and a definition for a construct and a way to measure that constructs. So most of these are the table of list of constructs is created using data analysis. And literature has some effect on naming the constructs, or you have some idea about constructs before doing the data analysis. How about relationships? So in a field survey, you want to figure out if A and B have a positive correlation or not. So what you do is you use data analysis. You try to reject the hypothesis by having a high p-value, for example, in regression analysis, ANOVA, or PLS. You also try to provide some reasons using the literature. But in a case study, not only you provide some, sometimes you have some quotes from the interviews to support a relationship, but your goal is to reject the hypothesis by simply finding that when A was high, B was low. And 1 or 2 cases is enough to just say that, oh, this relationship is disconfirmed. Or when A was low, B was high. Because it's positive correlation, you want, if A is high, B must be high, but in your data analysis, you have found that, oh, A is high, but B is low in one case. So then you would say that I reject this hypothesis. So that's the difference between the field survey, a questionnaire, and an interview, a case study. So with an explanatory case study, Again, the relationship, the reason for the relationships, the influence, they all roots in literature. However, supporting this relationship roots in data analysis. And sometimes you may find new whys here. With an exploratory case study, the table of the list of relationships, the table of relationship is completely based on your data analysis that may be supported by literature later. So most of this is created using the data analysis. And that's why exploratory case study can be difficult. You see here, you have to create constructs. You have to provide measurement using data analysis. And then you also need to create the list of relationships, all these columns yourself. So this makes exploratory case study a little bit more difficult, but it's going to be more rewarding because you're suggesting a new theory. But if you have an explanatory case study, you already have your nomological model, you already have your constructs, table of constructs, you have your list of relationships, these 3 columns. You just need to fill out this data analysis result. So of course, explanatory case study would be easier. Note that even the organization of the thesis must be different between the 2 studies. Most of you are familiar with this organization because it's also very familiar, is also used for field survey. You have an introduction, then you have a literature review, then you have a chapter on theoretical development where you suggest your theory, the relationships, and the constructs. So, and then you suggest a methodology. After that, you write about data analysis and you suggest the result of testing that theory, if those theories are rejected or not. And after that, you describe, what's your contribution to the literature was, what is new in your theory in comparison to the literature, and then you have a conclusion. In an exploratory case study, in a grounded theory, things are different. You start with introduction, you provide a theoretical background, some sort of literature review that suggests some initial constructs, and perhaps it describes a very big ground theory just as a lens to, explain things. So it's quite, most of the time very short. Then you, in your methodology, you would say that I'm going to use exploratory case study, and I'm going to collect data from these cases, and so on and so forth. The data analysis is not about testing theory. You don't have any relationships. You don't have any construct at this stage. In this section, you suggest the constructs and the propositions, the relationship between those constructs based on the data analysis. And after that, you would say that, these constructs were new, these relationships were new, and then conclusion. So you see, things are quite, even the organization of the paper, the organization of the thesis should be different for these 2 types of theory. Okay, I leave this exercise to you. I just wanted to show you again that, in an exploratory case study, most of these are found using data analysis. But in an explanatory case study where you try to test an existing theory, a theory that you created using literature review, most of these stuff are created using literature review. This is the question that I would like you to think carefully about. I give you 1 minute. So the question is that you have found a construct called alignment in the literature. The literature suggests a definition for that, the congruence between business strategy and IS strategy. And it suggested a way to measure that, 3 questions. It says that ask 3 questions from the CIO. The IS strategy is congruent, aligned with the corporate business strategy. Decision in IS planning are tightly linked with organization's strategic plan. Our business strategy and IS strategy are closely aligned. So in a questionnaire, they just ask 3 questions. You choose a value from strongly disagree to strongly agree, from 1 to 5, for example, and you have this. But now you want to use alignment in an explanatory case study. You cannot just ask this question. Of course, you have to ask these questions from the person, but that's not enough, because this is just one source of data. You need to have data triangulation. You need to find other ways to measure this. How could you do that? This is the question. This is how you can do that. You can ask the CIO and the CEO to answer the following questions from the survey. But you want to also check if these 2 persons are in reality aligned or not. You ask the CIO to provide the top 3 priorities in IT. You ask the same question from the CEO to provide the top 3 priorities in IT. Then you check the 2 lists. If they are exactly the same, alignment is high. If there are items that there are no shared items, alignment is low, very low. If there are some items, shared items, but the priority are different, you would say that, oh, it's medium. So not only you have a quantitative data, you also have a qualitative way with interviews to figure out if the alignment is high or low. You can also go and read the IT strategy document and extract the top IT priorities. Then you can read the business strategy document and try to extract top IT priorities, then compare them. So you see, this is called data triangulation. There are 3 different ways to figure out the value of alignment in only one case. And that's why case study has details, to just, have reliable, measures for constructs. Okay. How about this question? You have time to conduct 6 interviews. This is where most of our students, go around. Would you study 6 cases and have an interview for each case, 1 interview per case? Or you would study these cases and interview 2 individuals for each case? So only 3 cases, 2 interviews per case, or 6 different cases, 1 interview per case. Which one you would go for? Exactly, you would go for 3 cases, the second option, and you try to have 2 individuals interviewed because you want data triangulation, because you want reliable values of constructs, scores for those constructs in one case. Good job. So let me check if there are any questions. Okay, no. Okay, how would you do